Welcome to another episode. Hope I'm really glad that you have taken this opportunity to join us today. Maybe you're on your lunch break if you're on the East Coast, or maybe it's morning for you if you're waking up in sunny California, or really wherever you are in the world. Welcome. Because one thing that is really cool here at Weekly Hope is we get guests that watch the show from all over the world. We've got friends from South Africa, from Ireland, from Nepal who've tuned in. So wherever you are joining us from today, we are so glad that you're here. And if you are a return visitor or a return viewer, you recognize my unofficial co-host of the show, Miss Elsa. She's joining us here today as well. She's sitting on my lap through the whole thing. And also, if you have tuned in before, you know that usually I live in, well, I go back and forth between Germany and Switzerland, but today I'm actually back in the United States. I'm with my family here in Michigan. That's where I was born and raised, a good Midwest girl at heart. And so it's great to be joining you stateside for this special episode this week. So we are going to be talking about a really cool topic today. But before I let you in a little bit into that, just want to let you know, if you're new, what this show is all about. So every week we welcome guests from across the spectrum of mental health and health to talk about a wide variety of different topics and to ask them questions and get their insight and wisdom about whatever it is that we're talking about that week. But also, we really have an incredible opportunity to hear from you. So obviously, we're doing this on Facebook Live. The point is questions, to comment, to share with us your own story. And you know what has been really incredible? We've been doing the show since May of last year. And what has been so cool is to see not only we get really fabulous questions from our viewers, but then so often things will come up in the comments and people will end up encouraging each other or offering each other support and help. And, I heard about this website, or why don't you check out this resource? Or, this was what happened with my son or daughter, and here's how you can help. And just, it really turns out to be this really fabulous conversation. But of course, that only happens if you participate. So just you're going to let us know who you are, where you're signing in from, say hello in the comments section, and of course, ask your questions at any time, and I will put them to our guest. So today's topic, really cool. Obviously, a lot of times we dive into very specific eating disorder related topics, but today we're just branching out just a little bit to talk about the more broader concept of nutrition, internal fitness, and internal health, exploring gut microbiomes, what that is, and the effect and the interconnection and interplay between stuff that's going on in our gut, our internal chemistry, and our mental health, because all of that is connected. It's something that we've talked about with lots of professionals on here before, that food is intrinsically linked to our mental health and well-being. So we have invited a really special guest to come on, Dr. Erika Engel, to talk about this. And before I bring her on screen, I'm going to read her bio for you. So Erika Ebbel Engel received her PhD in biochemistry from Boston University School of Medicine. She holds a BS from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. No big deal. In 2002, Erika founded Science from Scientists, an award-winning national nonprofit focused on improving science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, attitudes and aptitudes for children age 9 to 13. She's a member of the MIT Visiting Committee for the Dean of Undergraduate Education and a part of the Advisory Council for the Dean of the School of Engineering at MIT. Erika is an advisory board member for Boston University School of Medicine's BEST Committee and is a member of the Board of Trustees and Executive Committee at Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts. So really incredible background, and we can't wait to speak with her. So I'll bring her on the other side of the screen there. There is Dr. Engel. Erika, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kirsten and Elsa, for the invitation.
Yeah, well, so cool to have you on, and I'm so glad when you and the folks at iCella reached out to me several months ago. I think probably in the last quarter of 2018, to talk a little bit about the great work that you're doing. And obviously, you have an incredible, fabulous background, academically and professionally. But want to start by asking you, how did you then go from this? Oh, lost Erika. Wait, she's back.
We're back.
There we go. Okay. As I say, with all that technology and engineering background, you probably won't be gone for long. But with what you studied, and obviously being heavy into medicine and very interested in the STEM fields, how did you then transition, and what inspired you to get involved in gut health, microbiomes, and helping people to feel or I guess explore their well-being?
Sure. So, as many things happen in life, serendipity played a very important role. I myself deal with a variety of different GI issues. So I do have irritable bowel syndrome. I live a stressful life, have had to figure out how to cope with that, with the stressful schedule, with anxiety, with many of these things. And so I think personally, this area is important to me. I've had family members who have suffered, and I'm sure we all have, and friends who have had neurodegenerative diseases, autoimmune conditions, just anything as simple, frankly, even as just acid reflux. It's all connected to the gut microbiome. And so when I was fortunate enough to meet my co-founder and chief scientist, a really cool guy by the name of Wayne Matson. Actually, I met him right before I started my PhD at BU. And he had just sold his company to, now it's actually owned by a group called Thermo Fisher. If you're in the space, Thermo Fisher is one of these big device companies, biotech companies. But he's been in the space now for more than 50 years. So he's in his late 70s at this point in his life, and was an entrepreneur, a scientist, was in the 70s and 80s responsible for inventing the pinprick test that was used to screen kids for lead levels. So again, it's sort of before our time, but now you go and buy a house. If you have a small child, you ask questions: how old is the house? Because of the lead issues and developmental problems that can happen if kids are exposed. So he invented the portable device that was used to screen kids for lead. He traveled all around the world with the CDC, other tests on the market as well that he'd invented. And pick a research institution. At some point, Wayne has probably worked with them throughout the course of his career, whether it's Harvard, the Brigham, UCLA. We've even worked with NASA, looking at DNA damage for people up in the International Space Station. Wayne and I met serendipitously at an event. And at the time, I had just finished my undergrad career and was trying to figure out, what to do next. And they, the folks there said, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "Well, there's someone you have to meet." And while I was there, I had a chance to talk to him, and he's quite fascinating. So I ended up doing my PhD work with him, and then after that, sat down and started discussing his research and research interests. And we started to look at essentially all the studies he had done, and we started to see the relevance of certain molecules in health as risk factors for certain diseases, as progression markers, and just overall markers of health and wellness. And so, we said, gee, we both have a passion for preventive medicine. How can we enable people to be able to better take control of their own health and lifestyle? And so we have this test now that's a very simple pinprick blood test that measures 11 different molecules, and then based on the results of that, provides nutrition advice, dietary nutrition advice, supplementation if you need it. People don't always need it. We take supplements we don't always need. Exercise tips and such to help people really understand what's going on with their, we call it internal fitness, but ultimately with their gut and their gut microbiome.
Yeah, so interesting. So can you just, before we go any further, can you explain, if people have never heard of the microbiome before, what exactly is that?
So basically, the digestive system starts with your mouth and then ends on the other side, as we all know. And the microbiome is all of the different microorganisms. So there are trillions of these things, whether they're bacteria, viruses, fungi, yeast, that live in that digestive system. So predominantly they're in the stomach, they're in the small intestine, the large intestine. So it's these critters that are responsible for the digestion and breakdown of the food, that travels through you, and then ultimately they secrete into the bloodstream the various byproducts of your eating. And those molecules are often super important. They can be, things like glucose, things like serotonin. They're molecules that go and play other, important roles in various systems' health.
Yeah, and it's so applicable to everything that goes into the refeeding process or the nourishment process, healing that relationship with food for someone in the eating disorder. Because as you just mentioned, glucose, as well as serotonin. And obviously the brain needs glucose to function. And serotonin is highly linked to anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and things of that nature. So it's just, we think that food is just, something that we need for energy or just fuel in the car, but it's so much more complex than that. And also, for individuals struggling with an eating disorder in recovery, you can't just do the emotional work. You also have to be nourishing your body properly, or else the glucose isn't getting to your brain can't function. And then obviously things like serotonin that are, and there's lots of other neurotransmitters at play too, which we'll talk about.
Sure.
But I wanted to ask you, to explain a little bit more the mind-body connection, because you mentioned irritable bowel syndrome, and we have that runs in my family. I can't tell you how many, and this is a nice fun thing to chat about on Facebook Live, I know, but it's one of those uncomfortable topics that especially people with eating disorders often have gut issues for the rest of their lives, and often struggle with irritable bowel syndrome. But if anyone knows or has IBS, they know that it's not just about elimination. It's so much anxiety. So can you just explain a little bit the mind-body connection, how that works, and how important it is to keep that in mind when it comes to nutrition?
Totally. It's critical. And again, with IBS, typically, you've been to the doctor, you've complained about your problems. There isn't when they say a physiological problem, right? So they didn't find that you had a tumor, a polyp, you don't have bleeding, you don't have parasites. So, what's left? And that's where the mind-body connection is so critical. So there's actually a whole separate nervous system. So when we talk about the central nervous system, movement of your hands, your legs, people typically have heard of that one. There's a whole nother nervous system that's connected, but it's called the enteric nervous system. And it actually...
Wait, how do you spell that? I'm going to put it up on the screen.
Yeah, so it's ENTERIC. Okay. Enteric nervous system, and it connects your brain to your gut. And in many ways, when people talk about the gut, they talk about it as your second brain. And, when people say things like, I have a gut-wrenching feeling, or I feel butterflies in my stomach, or I have, my gut instinct. Why do you feel that in your gut? Well, because there is that connection between your brain and your gut, and it's through this enteric nervous system. It also, there's chemical signals that transmitted between the two. And then there's actual just, motility, things like peristalsis that connect the two. So super, important. Hormones, neurotransmitters, electrical impulses, all these different things. Your gut actually has a ton of neurons and a neuronal network in it. Nobody thinks about that, but it is in fact the case. So again, when you are stressed or you feel anxiety, typically that reflects back to the gut. Or if your gut, for example, let's say you don't have motility, and as a result of serotonin not being secreted. Serotonin is very intimately associated with motility of the gut. You don't have serotonin, maybe you're chronically constipated. Well, guess what? Yeah, that's enough to cause anxiety, right? And so that goes back up to your head and creates that feeling. So they're very, very much interconnected.
Yeah, we've got some people signing in. I just want to say hello. We've got Sarah signing in from Seattle. Hey, Sarah, it's great to have you back. Great to see you. Catherine as well. Excuse me. Joining us from Lake Charles, Louisiana. Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for being here. And Chris also, who says hello and says early intervention with eating disorders is absolutely essential. Yeah, and preventative health is so much a huge part of that, which is why we're taking the time to talk about that. So thanks, Chris. And this is interesting. Catherine mentions, she said yes, and helped me big time. And is that? Sorry, I don't know why I'm getting so choked up talking about digestion. It just makes me so happy that we're covering this topic. No, but Catherine talks about exercise, and I'd love to hear from you too about how that affects mental health and internal fitness as well, the link to exercise and finding the right balance, because a lot of times you have people who struggle with eating disorders who abuse exercise and push their body too hard. So how do you find that good balance?
Right. I mean, That's a tough question to quantify. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why, we went into this business and we have a test, because the test actually provides a baseline metric. So you can kind of get a sense for how damaged your body is when you take it. Otherwise, it's kind of a matter of opinion, right? It's like, well, what is actually right for me? Is running a mile okay? Should I be weightlifting? And if you don't know what's happening because you haven't measured it, it's very difficult to tell someone blindly, you shouldn't do this, or go and run an Ironman or whatever else, right? So I think it's a tough question to answer. I would say this: in general, exercise is positive. Not to overstress your body, not to get to the point where you can't walk the next day, but even just 15 to 20 minutes of walking a day stimulates the body to do the right thing. It increases the motion of your intestines, right? So when you exercise, everything speeds up. I mean, this is the scientific way of explaining it, but everything speeds up. So you have a better chance of having bowel movements that work. Your energy level goes up because your body has to move and function. The ATP has to be generated, right? So movement in general is a very, very positive thing. When it comes to the specifics of the types of exercise or the duration, that's where, I think it's important to talk to someone who is an expert, who knows you, your body, your needs, or to have a test, right? So, in our case, we have a test. We measure certain types of molecules. Some are actually damaged molecules. And many of our professional athletes, we see they have very, very high levels of some of these damaged molecules because they are pushing really hard and almost to the point where it's too much. But in general, exercise is a good thing. It just has to be tempered for each individual.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. Walking. Even just walking, like you mentioned.
Walking. Yeah.
It clears the head incredibly, especially getting out in nature. Actually, the Japanese have this really wonderful thing called taking a forest bath. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. No. But just stressing the importance of getting out into nature, and in particular the forest. And so I'll say that where I live in Zurich, there's the forest, just like a 10-minute walk, and I say, okay, I have to go get my forest bath. But it does so much for the head as well as for the body and getting things moving, like you mentioned. I'm curious, does one, like, I'm trying out how best to figure out this question. It works really well in my head. But insofar as thoughts, stress, anxiety, and their effect on the gut, we know there's such a connection. But does one cause the other, or do they both kind of cause each other? Do you know what I mean?
Cause each other.
Because it's so hard. It's like chicken and the egg, is one more responsible than the other, or is it really just an interplay dynamic where both need to be addressed?
Both need to be addressed. They're an interplay dynamic. So often you'll talk to people with anxiety or depression, and they will self-report that they have GI issues, pain, trouble with, stool, like all these different, or vice versa, right? If you have those pains, you then feel those emotions sometimes as a result of that, but it's hard to know exactly which is generating what. So it's important to tackle both. That's why mindfulness, it's not so simple as to just say, solve this one thing, right? And I think that's where, to some extent, Western medicine, which is amazing in many ways, doesn't always work here, because they're always looking at a target, the one thing you need to do, the one medicine to take, how do I solve it with this one thing? And in reality, this is a problem of many things, right? So how do I learn how to, better cope with my stress, my anxiety, through, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever? How do I do that on the mental side? Because if I can calm my brain down, the signals don't go down to my tummy saying that I'm consistently in fight or flight mode, I'm stressed out and I'm unhappy and right? Or vice versa, if I have a gut dysbiosis where I actually have the wrong species of stuff in my gut, and thus I can't eat foods and I have food allergies and I'm constantly suffering, that also can lead to your feeling of just like, I don't know what to do, I feel lost, I'm stressed, so it's, but the feeling is the same. It's just, one is causing the other in a different kind of way.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm sure that this is just so relieving for people who are watching to be like, yes, this is exactly kind of what I go through all the time and what I'm working on. It's just nice to hear people talking about it. We've got Catherine says it's crazy how our minds can run our entire health all around, and it's very true. Sarah asked, wait, what tests, how are these tests done? So that's a great segue to, why don't you explain a little bit about the, and I put the link to the Excella test in the Excella test exactly tests and some more information.
Sure. So, there are a variety of different tests, and again, it really depends on what you're dealing with in the problem. But I'll tell you a little bit about ours. So it's a pinprick blood test. You poke your finger and you bleed a small volume of blood, really about 8 to 10 drops. It's 40 microliters for the dork talk, but a small volume of blood on a device. You close it up, you send it to us. And we currently look at 11 different molecules. If you're interested, they're all up on the website, but they are all associated with, there's a pathway biologically. It's called the tryptophan pathway. You guys, I'm sure, have heard of tryptophan because typically it's associated with turkey dinner. Tryptophan is found in many, many types of foods. It's also a precursor to many of the important chemicals, neurotransmitters. For example, tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin. So if you're not getting enough of these initial fuels for the body, then your body can't really take that and do anything with it. So again, it's why nutrition and knowing what to eat, how, and the types of foods to eat is really critical. So anyway, you send us that test. We measure these various molecules, all of which are important with, some are important for gut health, some are important for mitochondrial health and energy creation, some are important as damage markers. If you don't have the right types of bacteria in the gut, say you have some invasive ones that aren't particularly healthy, they secrete chemicals into your blood that we call them damage markers. So we measure some of those as well. And then we say, okay, here is your results report. Here are the types of foods that you need in order to balance out your tummy. Here are suggestions for different exercises based on what you self-reported you wanted to accomplish. Here are some supplements that you might consider taking if you need them. And so it's based on sort of Wayne's 50 years of being in this space, looking across, healthy and unhealthy samples across a very wide range of conditions, everything from the neurodegenerative disease family to diabetes and heart disease, depression, anxiety, even concussions. And these molecules have been shown to be really important across this broad range of different conditions as targets. And, if your levels are too high or too low, it can cause
an eating disorder. They're very, very hypersensitive and hyper attuned to how they're feeling all the time, especially internally. So I can imagine that this could be really, really helpful to try to maybe take some of the ambiguity or the just feeling out of it.
Right.
For those, I'm wondering maybe who are not necessarily struggling with an eating disorder, but are really interested in preventative health. What are some things that they might look for that they might say, okay, this is a sign that maybe my internal, the microbiome is out of whack? What are some symptoms to look for that would clue someone in that maybe they might need to start thinking more about?
There's the obvious ones, right? Like whether it's pain or gas or bloating or, we call it constipation, diarrhea, like the sort of yin yang going back and forth between the two, inconsistent stool habits, right? So let's say you don't go to the bathroom for 4 days. Happens when I travel all the time. It's funny. It's like your body becomes comfortable with its environment. Anytime you change that environment, things happen. But so there's the actual physiological things that you feel. There's also the mental, things, whether it's brain fog, tiredness, exhaustion, like you don't feel like you get a good night's sleep. You just feel funky. I mean, it's not particularly scientific, but much more difficult to quantify those symptoms. So it's as simple as maybe, when I eat oatmeal, every single time I end up with pain and gas and why? And I've been allergy tested. I'm not allergic to oats, but there's something that happens every single time I eat that oatmeal. And again, what is the reason for that? Could there be a cause that is, who knows, right? But I think it's You have to, what I do like about the test as a scientist is that it does demystify the problem, right? So even with some of the folks we work with, when you tell them something like hydration is important, and they're like, yeah, of course, I know that. I make an effort, but it's hard. Like, and then they get their scores, right? And it shows very clearly that some of the damage markers are very present in their system. And these damage markers, because of the way your kidneys and your liver work, they would be voided much faster if you actually drank more water, right? And so you say to the person, look, these damage markers are here. You can try, there's supplements and things and food adjustment, but in all honesty, the way the body works is it sulfonates. It's a chemical process. It takes things on the way out when you excrete them, and it attaches a molecule to them. And if you have a ton of this stuff built up, the only way to get rid of it is by drinking more water so that you can pee it out. So it's right. So it's suddenly not like, oh, someone's just telling me I need to go drink more water. It's, I am dehydrated to the point where I have a buildup of these damage markers that could be actually influencing my health in a negative way. So it's a simple example, but many of the things we are told to do, just they seem like common sense, but they're never really grounded in, well, do I even care about this? I mean, it's like everyone says it, but does it matter? So when you have a baseline, it actually helps you to say, you know what? Yeah, that actually is me, and I should take this seriously.
Yeah, so cool. And people are just loving this. Also, Sarah says, wow, okay, this is awakening and reminding. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Drink water, Sarah. Yeah, right now.
Yeah. No, this is so cool. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. And usually people that are in recovery are very like, I want to know more. I want to be educated about this. I don't just want to do what my dietitian or therapist tells me to do. I want to know why it's important. And so it's been so cool to have you on to clarify some of this. So last question before we go. You've been so generous with your time, and I know that you're busy. But last thing is, we do have a lot of people that are watching in this kind of in the middle of recovery. And, I know that it's not something you've experienced specifically, but you did share your own, journey with stress and anxiety and IBS and, kind of coming through that. What encouragement or hope would you give to people that are kind of in the midst of that struggle to say like, hey, it does get better?
You can do it. And, ultimately, and I'm a scientist, so I sometimes it comes across the wrong way. And so please, know it comes from a place of caring, but only you can do it. Only you can mentally decide that, I had a time in my life, I was really stressed, and it just affected me to the point of, I couldn't stand up. I mean, it was like this anxiety, and there was nothing wrong. I go to the doctor and they'd be like, you're fine. And I was like, I'm not fine, because I feel like my brain's about to explode, and I'm just like, and I had to realize that I had to accept, and it was my path. I needed to learn the techniques for coping with that. When that feeling came on, I needed to understand what I needed to do mentally to get myself to a place where I had the strength to do that. And it took a lot of time. And I actually, when that happened, I started to really, in a different way, you start to feel for people who talk about it. Because before you're kind of like, yeah, what is that? I don't really know. And, you don't empathize the same way. But when that happened, I'm like, this is real, and it feels entirely real. So not to say it's not, but you have to learn the techniques to cope with it. And to some extent, with help, with people helping you. But I had to finally just decide. It was like, I'm not going to let this thing get to me, because it's changing my life. I'd be afraid. Oh, I wonder if can I go do that? Because it really stresses me out and it makes me feel bad. I had to just be like, you know what? I'm just going to go. And for a couple of days after, I just shivered through every meeting until it did, and now, even now it happens, and I have to do the same thing. I have to be like, okay, time to hunker down and just breathe, sit down, figure out how I can, cope. So it's,
I loved what you said. You can do it, and you have to make the mental decision to do it. Yeah. This is recovery, or, finding and connecting with your healthy self is a daily decision.
Absolutely.
It really is. Dr. Engel, Erika, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
A joy to have you on, and want to just remind everyone again, if you want to learn more about your microbiome and find out more about the great work that Erika is doing, you can visit ixcela.com. That's IXCELA.com. I put the link in the comments. Yeah, so if that could be possibly something that's helpful for you, go for it. But we will say goodbye to Erika. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
It was great to meet you too.
There you go.
I brought you back on for that last thing. No, it was wonderful to have you here. Thanks so much.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye. And just want to let all of you know and just say thank you so much for tuning in. I know this was an interesting subject matter today, but it's so good to talk about these things because so many people have anxiety and stress related to the way that their gut functions and what's going on inside of their body. So it's so good to just demystify these things and speak honestly about them. So thanks for hanging in there with us, and thanks for all your great comments and questions. We are going to be back for another episode of Weekly Hope next week. I'm pretty sure. Let me just check my calendar. Yes, so we are back. All right, and I don't want to leave. Wait. There we go. Okay. We are just want to let you know we are back with another episode of Weekly Hope next week. That's 12 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. Becca says, thank you as always, Kirsten. You are so welcome, Becca. It is my joy. I hope you guys learned a lot, had a great session, and we will see you back here for another episode. Elsa just totally crashed. She's asleep. I think her microbiome is just fine. She sleeps perfectly. Hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we will see you same time next Wednesday for another episode of Weekly Hope.